Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Fall calving season is here, and today we're talking about first calf heifers. We're joined now by Dave Lallman, our extension beef cattle specialist. And Dave, looks like you've got some nice cow-calf pairs here, and I guess we should start with kind of the steps that people can take to get to the successful end result.
Okay, well that's a nice set of heifers, and we're proud of them. But you're right, it takes a lot of planning, good management to get to that point. And this is the time of year now that they're on the ground, we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to get pregnant again early in the breeding season this year, so they get to remain part of our cow herd.
In terms of breeding, what are some of those early things to think about and some of the things that should be timed out?
So we should probably start a year ago if we want to start there with the breeding season for the first calf heifers, or the virgin heifers, if you will. And the main thing there is probably consider keeping more heifers than you need as replacements, and use a short breeding season. And if you can pull the bulls out of the heifers about 45 days or so, and then about 45 days later, you could preg check, have your veterinarian preg test, or use a blood sample to preg test those females, and from that then you could sell the opens or do whatever you choose to with them at that time, and then manage the bred heifers separately.
Then it comes around to calving time. What are some considerations then?
Well, as you mentioned, these are fall calving cows, and so they should calve in good body condition. Our fall calving heifers and cows just almost always do, because they go through the summer prior to calving with good forage. If we don't overgraze our pastures, heifers are generally in good shape. And these heifers are about a body condition score of 5.5 to 6, which is where we'd like for them. Now the challenge from here forward until around Thanksgiving, which is breeding time, we want to make sure they don't lose too much body condition between now and then.
So after calving, then what are the sort of forage and nutrition needs?
The main thing would be not to delay the supplementation program. Most folks are going to be checking their heifers anyway as they're calving, and so why not begin the supplementation program as part of that, so they come up and they're easy to look at. And so we encourage people to initiate the supplementation program early. Also, we want to make sure that they have good quality pasture available. So whether it's a hay meadow that has had some late season regrowth, certainly we don't want to turn them loose or turn them out in an overgrazed pasture, or one that's been picked over all summer long without feeding some hay or something. So we just want to make sure that they have good quality forage in ample amounts, to give them the best opportunity to maintain that body condition until around Thanksgiving time.
There's also a financial aspect that runs parallel to all of this, and you've crunched the numbers. What have you found? Yeah,
based on the enterprise budgets, we estimate that we have about $1,350 invested in these females, and that's just using a commercial market price for the heifers as weanlings a year ago. But between our feed and pasture costs, synchronization costs, artificial insemination, and a little bit of interest, we've got about $1,350 in them invested. So that's why, when you get to this point and they've got a calf on the ground, the 2-year-old year is the most difficult year to get females pregnant. And so we want to give them the best opportunity. If there's ever a time not to cheat your females in your cow herd, it's the 2-year-old year.
Great advice today, Dave Lallman. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you again soon.
You're welcome.
This fall looks to provide some promise in terms of adequate moisture to grow wheat pasture. Cow-calf producers can utilize wheat pasture as a protein supplement once we get an adequate amount of forage grown, and that's generally going to be sometime in the first to middle part of December before we can turn some cows out on wheat pasture. The best way for adult cows to utilize wheat pasture, I think, is by limit grazing. And by that I mean that we put those cows, say the dry pregnant cows, those that are going to calve in February and March, put them out on the wheat pasture one day and then off onto a native or Bermuda grass pasture, or perhaps around a big round bale for 2 to perhaps 3 days. We can still get enough protein into those dry cows with just 1 day on the wheat pasture. Now, by 1 day, I don't mean the full 24 hours. Generally, they can get their entire fill of wheat pasture in 3 to 5 hours. If you're watching them and you see those cows after they've been out there that length of time start to lay down, then it's probably a good time to go ahead and move them back off to the dry pasture or around the hay bales. Generally, the water source is going to be in the native Bermuda grass pasture anyway, and it's not too difficult to move them back to that particular pasture. As to how much wheat we need, generally I use a rule of thumb that with adequate growth, good moisture, and we're limit grazing these cows, 1 acre per adult cow is a pretty good rule of thumb. Now, if you're one of those that likes to leave the cows out on wheat pasture full time, it's probably going to take more acres than that, because there's going to be additional trampling, the laying down, going to mess up some of the wheat, and therefore less of it available for them to actually consume. If you're leaving cows out on wheat for a good portion of the winter months into and through calving, I really want to have you think about the possibility of a condition called grass tetany. Grass tetany is a deficiency of 1 or 2 minerals, magnesium and calcium. Grass tetany generally occurs in older cows right after they calve, when they're giving the most amount of milk. Grass tetany is a situation that if you happen to see that in one of the cows this spring, call your local large animal veterinarian as soon as possible. They can bring out an intravenous injection that contains both magnesium and calcium and can revive the cow actually pretty quickly. I think grass tetany can be prevented in a large number of the cases just by putting out a mineral mix that contains magnesium at about 12 to 15%, and then considerable amount of calcium will also be included in that mineral. You want to start feeding that several months before the cows start to calve, so that they're used to eating it at a tune of about 3 to 4 ounces per head per day. Once we get to calving time, then those lactating cows, if we're still limit grazing the wheat pasture, we probably want to have them on wheat pasture 1 day, off on the dry pasture 1 day, on an every other day basis, so that those lactating cows get more protein and energy out of the wheat pasture. We hope this gives you a little better idea of how to utilize wheat pasture as a supplement for your cows this winter, and perhaps save a few dollars in terms of a purchased supplement to get those cows through the winter in good body condition to have a good chance to rebreed next year. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Canola planting's going on across Oklahoma, and Josh, you guys are getting the last seeds in the ground for OSU, right?
Yes, we're kind of on that home stretch, kind of getting towards the end, and it's good because we're getting right there. You know, our window typically for canola planting is the 10th of September through the 10th of October. A little flexibility on that back end, but pretty much we need to have most of our seeds in by the 10th of October. So, you know, kind of right now we're at that back end, and so we're trying to do as much as we can right now.
Well, and being at that back end, there's not really the margin of error when it does come to planting. What's some of the things that producers need to be sure that they get right whenever they plant?
A couple of the things we just need to make sure we're doing is planting correctly. That way we're getting really good seed soil contact. It's one of those things, it's not planting too deep because you can pretty much wash the seed out. You can't plant too shallow because then you run into other difficulties. But it's getting that seed right in at the right place. Getting, if you we've seen some benefit from some pre-plant fertilizer in row, and so if you're doing that, making sure you're not going too high or too low.
A lot of producers use a drill like this to actually plant the seeds, but there's some differences in settings from wheat to canola, right?
Yeah, there's some nuances with that, and this is kind of where we run into some issues, especially with some first-time canola growers, is that we are putting out a lot less seed. Most of the time, instead of 65, 80 pounds of seed on wheat, we're putting out 2 to 4 pounds. And so it's making sure that we're not putting out too much, not putting out too little, and really the settings that we do here really can set us off on a good foot for the rest of the season.
So let's go through it real quick and just kind of show us where producers need to be watching whenever they do make the adjustments to the planter.
Well, I mean, Dave, the first thing that you're going to need to do is spend a lot of time kind of right where we are right now. Calibrating the drill is ultimately very challenging with canola. With wheat, with the drill, what we actually have is we'll have the canola or any of the seed get pushed from the seed box down through these little rotating mechanisms, which then go down into our planting unit.
Right.
For wheat, we can have those open because we're putting a lot of pounds of wheat. For canola, these have to be really closed, and for a lot of growers that have older box drills or anything along those lines, oftentimes they have to actually get modifiers to those things to actually allow that to close small enough to get those 3 and 4 pounds while still making sure that we're putting any seed out at all. So when we go through and we calibrate, what we need to know is just a couple things. If you're on a box drill like we have here, the radius of your tire, we need to know how many rotations we're going to do to theoretically plant 100 feet, 200 feet, 500 feet, what have you want to do. And then essentially all we're going to do is catch seed from these seed units, and then we'll weigh it up, determine how much you're actually putting out on a per acre basis, and like I said, it's adjusting a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, and so a lot of time is spent on a gravel road, actually calibrating that drill, because that's ultimately where a majority of our stuff goes. We have an app that's available in your iOS and your Android devices that all we're actually asking is it's a fill in the blank. And so it prompts you to tell you exactly what blanks you need to fill in, and it's going to be things as simple as how wide is your drill, what's your row spacing on your planting units, what's the radius of your drive wheel. That way, and then what you do is you rotate it your certain amount of revolutions, you catch your seed, and then you put your seed, how much seed you actually caught in there, and you hit enter, and it tells you how many pounds per acre, how many seeds per acre you're doing on average.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Josh. And for more information on that app and other tools available to help calibrate your canola planter, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Rain came in buckets Wednesday for a large area west of Tulsa that covered parts of Tulsa, Osage, Pawnee, Noble, and Kay counties. The large red area on a rainfall map from 9 p.m. Wednesday indicated an area where total rainfall was over 8 inches for the previous 24 hours. The sad part of this map was the lack of rainfall in the southeast. The good news was that Kingfisher picked up 2 14/100 inches of rain, the most in one rain event for Kingfisher since April 29th. A relative humidity map from Tuesday, October 2nd at 10:30 a.m. showed high humidities across the state. The lowest relative humidity was 74% at Putnam. The highest humidities were 99% in the southeast. Humidities in the Panhandle were in the low 80s. The Dewpoint temperatures showed much drier air in the Panhandle compared to the rest of the state, about a 20-degree difference. So why were the humidities so similar in the Panhandle to other areas in the state? The air temperatures for most of Oklahoma at 10:30 Tuesday morning were in the mid-70s. In the Panhandle, air temperatures were in the 50s, close to 20 degrees cooler. Here's Gary with a look at a dry, droughty southeast.
Let's go right to that Drought Monitor report and see what we have. Well, we did have a dramatic increase in the amount of abnormally dry, which is the yellow area, and the moderate drought, which is the light tan area, across the eastern third to half of Oklahoma, depending on which part of the state you look at. Much of southeastern Oklahoma and also up from east central into northeastern Oklahoma, that's where we saw those increases. However, as I said, those areas were getting rain, so hopefully when we show this map next week, we will see a big reduction just like we saw a big increase this week. Now this map is built largely off of what happened during September. And if we go back to the September departure from normal rainfall map, we can see that area across the eastern third of Oklahoma, down into parts of south central Oklahoma, where the deficits were generally from 2 to nearly 4 to 5 inches of rainfall, depending on where you look at. In fact, a couple of areas in southeast Oklahoma had no rainfall for the month of September, which is incredible considering it's southeastern Oklahoma, our rainiest part of the state. And also southeastern Oklahoma had its driest September on record, dating all the way back to 1895. So that's where we saw that dramatic increase on the Drought Monitor map. Looking forward from the Climate Prediction Center, the outlook for the temperature, we do see increased odds of above normal temperatures across most of the state, all but the northwestern quarter. And then for precipitation, we see increased odds for below normal precipitation across that southeastern half to third of the state, especially in far southeastern Oklahoma. Now remember, those outlooks are for the entire month, not what just happens during the first week or two. So we'll have to wait until the end of the month to see if those actually came true. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We're talking profit strategy with Kim Anderson this week. He's our crop marketing specialist. And Kim, producers want to know how they can get ahead in 2018. So let's kind of just review the current situation.
Well, looking at the situation, you got to start with price. Over the last 10 years, the Oklahoma price has averaged $5.90 a bushel. The 2018 for harvest delivered wheat, the market's offering right at $4 a bushel. Also in the market is a protein premium that we have now. If you look at ordinary wheat, that's wheat with less than 11% protein. It's a zero basis or zero premium. 11.4% protein wheat has a premium of $1.15. And you can look at why are prices low and the protein premium. One, we're short of premium protein around the world, but the stocks are high. World ending stocks are projected to be 9.7 billion bushels, a record. It's about the third record in a row. U.S. ending stocks are lower this year. They were average is 840 million bushels. This year they're projected to be 933 million bushels. That's down from 1.2 billion last year, so that's good. Hard red winter wheat stocks are also lower this year. They're projected to be 453 million bushels compared to 593 last year.
Let's talk now about how Oklahoma is looking.
Well, you look at Oklahoma, let's start with the yields. The average yield is 30 bushels per acre. But you know, that includes your grazed yields, grazed pasture. It includes all those wheat land that are used for other sources, and wheat's just kind of a short cash crop there. There's a significant number of producers that will average 45 bushels or better. You look at cost of production. For the 30 bushel an acre land, you're looking at probably $175 variable cost or out-of-pocket cost, $15 fixed to give you about $190 an acre there. 45 bushel wheat, and talking to some of the people, say around $200 out of pocket, 15 fixed for about $215 an acre.
And then what does all this mean for income?
Well, if you're looking at income at 30 bushels an acre, $4 wheat, that's $120. You got 190 in it, you're looking at $70 an acre loss there. That's if you better have some other income on those acreage. If you've got 45 bushels with say 11.4% protein, and say you get about 3/4 of that protein premium, you're going to get about $475. That gives you an income of around $214, which is right at break even.
The last few weeks that we've been visiting with you on SUNUP, it's mostly been the negative category. What can producers do with all of this information? What's their takeaway?
Well, I think their takeaway is that they're at $4 wheat, which is low. There are some producers out there breaking even or have a break-even cost less than $4. They're not making enough to make a living, but they are at least making a profit. I think you've got to look at best management practices. And it's not just I can go from 30 bushels or less per acre average now and get it up to 45 bushels in 1 year. I think you're looking over time. You look at double cropping, or you're looking at another crop to break those disease cycles, those weed cycles, those fungicide cycles. You've got to look at practices to get your yields above average. And when you get yields above average and you're producing a quality product, there's producers last year with 60 plus test weight wheat with 14% protein, and they merchandised that product and they got a premium for it. They made some money with below $4 prices this year. I think that's what we're talking about, and I think that's the message.
Okay, Kim, thanks a lot to think about. And now we want to turn to Brian Arnell with his next lesson on improving soil health. This week, he's talking about lime.
One of my common topics in extension teaching and in my programming is fixing acidic soils or low pH soils. The way we do that is the application of ag lime. So let's go into the basics of ag lime today. So ag lime is really starting out as a rock form. It starts out as limestone. We are taking those big chunks of rock that is dug out of the soil, the same rock that's put on dirt roads and in parking lots, and grinding it down to a very fine powder. Limestone is calcium carbonate, CaCO3. Now this is very important as we start talking about the soil system and wanting to increase soil pH. Now, acidic soil is a soil system that has too many hydrogen ions in the system. So you basically have a bunch of hydrogen floating around in the soil and not enough hydroxides. To change soil pH, to raise soil pH, we want to take some of these hydrogen and turn them into hydroxides. Now how we do that through limestone is the conversion of, we put in this finely ground rock, finely ground limestone as a calcium carbonate. The carbonate breaks off, so we have CO3 splits off, grab these hydrogens, and we have the evolution of CO2 and H2O. We'll start breaking those off. So we take a oxygen from carbonate and we put it over on hydrogen, and we steal hydrogen out of the system. We can actually take 2 hydrogen out of the system with that, so we have carbon dioxide and water. That is our first and one of the most important reactions that we get with limestone. If you want to learn more about how liming helps the soil system and the chemical processes behind it, I have lectures available online. The link to those can be found at sunup.okstate.edu.
Have you ever wondered why a 1,300-pound steer doesn't necessarily equate to 1,300 pounds of meat when you've taken it to a local processor? Jake Nelson is our meat processing specialist here at the Food and Ag Products Center. And Jake, kind of explain this differences in the yield, a little different than people might think.
It is. If you've never been exposed to the process, the conversion of an animal into a carcass or into the cuts, I think you're often, one of the first impressions you have is you're astounded at how much weight is lost through that process. In beef cattle, typical slaughter steer or heifer, there's a term we refer to as dressing percentage, and that's the weight of the carcass expressed as a percentage of the live weight. Typical dressing percentage is in that 62 to 63%. What astounds a lot of people is of that 37% that's lost at slaughter, A third of that is the hide. Hides are very heavy. So as soon as you remove the hide, it ends up in leather processing and shoes and belts and all the things we enjoy. There's a lot of weight immediately lost from that. Of course, the remaining then are those items that are not part of the process that come out, internal organs, feet, head, things of that nature. So at the end of the day, into the slaughter process, you've only got about 62% of what you started with.
Is it the same percentages in other livestock?
It's close, but not identical. Pork is another popular species that is often consumed here in Oklahoma. Local custom processors convert a lot of pork for people. Because we slaughter pork differently, we leave the skin on. We dehair pork instead of skinning them. We leave the feet on. The dressing percentage is a little higher. We're in the low to mid 70s on a pork dressing percentage. And then the conversion is a little higher as well. And again, that depends on boneless versus bone-in cuts, the fat trim level on the cuts, and all of that is driven by the customer.
Why do you think it's important for folks to be informed about some of the stuff we're talking about today?
I think it's easy just to forget that. And I think many people are shocked that they put a lot of money and resources into this animal. They want to consume this animal, and it's a very long project, especially with beef. You know, it's a long project to get that animal fed. And you put those resources into it, and again, you deliver this whole large animal unit, and then you take home 5 or 6 boxes of meat, and it just is, there's a shock value there, because until you've been exposed to it, you don't fully understand what happens. And it's shocking to some people. And if folks have questions about that, I would recommend that they, if they're going to have an animal they would like to have processed, that they go and talk to their processor, ask questions, ask about yields. Many of them have websites now and they put that information out there. They will gladly talk to people and explain the process and help them understand what they will see long before it even happens.
That transparency is key, and of course understanding the science behind it.
Exactly.
Jake, thanks for your time today. We'll see you again soon. That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. From the North Range, I'm Lyndall Stout. Remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.